Today I'll be talking about one of the first, no, actually the first greatest hits album I ever bought. Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Michael Douglas to Dr. Pundit, another episode. And as usual, I'm not here to talk about medicine. I'm here to talk about music. And on today's show, the first greatest hits album I ever bought with my hard-earned money back in early 1983, Olivia Newton-John's Greatest Hits. And greatest hits albums, I've of course owned many of them in my life. Many of them I think are very essential greatest hits albums. Some of them have been really just cobbled together. And over the years, I think the biggest criterion I have with respect to a greatest hits album is, is it cohesive? Is every track on there an essential track? Not only with respect to the artist's career, but the artist's maturity up to that point. Sure, popularity is very important because the more people hear it, the more popular the artist is, the more popular the songs are. And that shouldn't be a strike against the album. It should just basically be a cohesive mix of songs that shows the maturation of an artist across a certain time period. And I think some of the best greatest hits albums are albums that don't try to be overflowing or overarching. And Olivia Newton-John's two greatest hits albums that were released, and actually she had a third released in the early 90s, which was more of a compilation album, but the true, frank greatest hits albums she released in 1977 and in 1982, Greatest Hits Volume 1 and Greatest Hits Volume 2, I think do a very good job of encapsulating the years up to those partitions that the greatest hits albums arbitrarily defined as her best work up to those points. And if that means popularity and, radio hits, then so be it. Greatest Hits Volume 2, I think, is one of those albums. It's extremely brief. There are 10 tracks on the album, but it's a very tightly controlled but very listenable and entertaining greatest hits album. And I think it's one reason I invested in it in early 1983 when I bought the album. Now let's take a look at the playlist of the album. The album starts off with Heart Attack, one of two new songs included in the album. Magic, Physical, Hopelessly Devoted to You, Make a Move on Me, A Little More Love, You're the One That I Want, Tied Up, Suddenly, and Xanadu. Now this compilation basically covered the years 1977, so the tail end of the Grease era, just after Physical. As a matter of fact, the two new songs in the album, Tied Up and Heart Attack, were part of the Physical sessions and are included on the special 40th anniversary release of that album. The songs that populate the album are from the Grease soundtrack, the LP Totally Hot from 1978, the LP Xanadu, the soundtrack, Physical, and of course Greatest Hits Volume 2. Now I want to talk about all the songs on the album because the album, again, not available on streaming services, but obviously you can easily construct this playlist with your favorite Olivia Newton-John tracks on any given streaming service. But that's not the point. The point is it's a great greatest hits album. It became one of her greatest selling albums in her career. It was a top 10 1982 to 83 ranking album on best of lists for that 12-month period. And the songs that really stick out to me there are three of them. Two of them were songs that were recorded during the sessions for the LP Physical. I've already alluded to them, Tied Up and Heart Attack. Tied Up was a song that was released after Heart Attack, one of two quote-unquote new songs on the Greatest Hits album. It only peaked in the upper 30s on the Billboard Hot 100, but it is a great song, capturing how she was, how her music was produced in that era, kind of that laid-back California sound, approaching yacht rock perhaps. Of course, everyone knows and is familiar with Heart Attack, the number 3 smash from that summer of 1982, both recorded during the Physical sessions. Now, were they throwaways? I don't know. I don't care, but they're both very good sounding tracks. The other track that I think is my favorite track on the album was a song that never hit the top 10, but is a staple on 1980s best of playlists, especially the adult contemporary variety. I'm talking about the top 20 hit by Olivia Newton-John and Cliff Richard. The duet, Suddenly, kind of the love theme from Xanadu. A great song, and it's one of those songs that brings the film together, and it certainly is a very essential part of the soundtrack. So the tracks Tied Up, Heart Attack, Suddenly, great tracks. Of course, the album is full of other great tracks, Magic and Physical, two of Olivia Newton-John's biggest hits. In all, Greatest Hits Volume 2 is, I think, a great Greatest Hits album for me to review because every song is highly listenable. And in the wake of Olivia Newton-John's passing, a great set of songs to encapsulate her mid but most successful part of her pop career. And I probably will be reviewing Greatest Hits Volume 1, which has a lot of her country stuff at the beginning, but Greatest Hits Volume 2 really stands out. It's a fantastic album, and I urge you all to listen to it. Great standout tracks, you can't go wrong with it, and an essential Greatest Hits album to belong to any collection. And I think a fitting Greatest Hits album for me to begin my journey on this channel reviewing all the Greatest Hits albums that have really meant a lot to me. If you like what you see here on this channel, Dr. Pundit, please consider subscribing and liking. It helps me out, it helps the channel out, helps me bring you more great content if this is what you want to see. As the late great Barry White used to say, let the music play.